All right, so we're running just a couple minutes behind, so hopefully we won't cut into his time too much. And we were talking a little bit about his intro and the kind of the typical formal intros and things like that. And I figured you guys can get all that material. It's on the flyers, it's in the brochures and everything else. And so one of the reasons that we invite people like Michael Del Bernard here is to inspire you guys, to have you thinking about possible directions that your creative pursuits might take, and really just sort of hopefully, expand what it is that you think is possible in the creative making fields. And so those are all the things that I'm thinking about, and Michael is certainly a huge inspiration to me as far as his creativity, his design sense, his energy, his enthusiasm, his passion for what he is to do. And so I think that's a good enough intro, and I think that'll all come through his work and his presentation, and we're just thrilled to have him here with us. And any of you guys are welcome. He'll be doing a technical demo tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., bright and early, down in the Metal Studio in 116 Arts Building. So you can come on down for that if you're interested in powder coating. But I'll turn it over to the very capable hands of Michael Del Bernard. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you guys for being here today, and hopefully you all know what a wonderful professor you have in Mr. James Thurman. He is also an inspiration to me, but I will no longer kiss his butt because now I'm here and I'm on stage and it's my turn now. So anyways, you can kind of see before I came up here, I put a little bit of different stuff on. It's kind of my Mr. Rogers. Let me put my inside coat on, my slippers on. Won't you please see my lecture kind of thing. James didn't really go too much into it, but I'm a metalsmith, a designer, I'm a teacher, and that is only just kind of a little bit of what I actually do. I build things for people, I powder coat things for people, I make jewelry, I have a gallery, I teach classes, I design jewelry professionally, you name it. I'll do some graphic design for you, I'll make some stickers, I'll powder coat the petals on your fixie if you want. All right, so you just get in touch with me. But I really, more than anything else, I enjoy being around people and other artists because I believe in the power of self-expression. And part of this is putting on my little character of MDB. I had to start using my full name, Michael Dale Bernard, because there's a famous cinematographer named Michael Bernard in LA. And so Google made me do it, all right? Google might make you do something crazy someday too, and you just have to embrace that and run with it. Okay, so get yourself an outfit, get yourself a cool little slogan, and just go with that. All right, now really about me personally, I am a design junkie. I build things because they are stuck in my head. All right, I daydream, I look at a lot of stuff. I would much rather ride shotgun and stare out the window than drive you somewhere. And those things get piled up, and I just have to get them out. So that kind of is why I said I'm selfish, because a lot of the things that I make are just for my own good, all right? I make them for myself. I live in LA, and a lot of people go, why would you want to live in LA? And really, we have everything in LA. We have just amazing art. We've got so many good artists. So much is there, and you have so much access to materials as well. I moved out there after getting a BFA in the Midwest. Moved out there and got experience to a whole different type of culture. Greater high art culture, greater street art culture. I like lowriders, I like tattoo shops, I like motorcycles. There's all these things that were out there, and they were just invading my head. So a lot of the inspiration that I draw from comes into this category that I call urban image smithing. All right, there's people that I think that are artists that they're taking the image with a capital I, when you think about it as a thing, and they are screwing with it. They're using it as an object, as a name, as a person. They're putting a different hat on it. They're putting a necklace on it. They're doing whatever they got to do to dress it up and make it into something else, to make it something that's their own. When I was in grad school at Cal State Long Beach, we had Bill Viola come and speak, and he's a pretty well-known video artist. And he said something that just really sat with me, and this was probably like 2004, 2005. It was right when I first got to school. And he said, ever since the introduction of Photoshop, the visual image has become unreliable. And I liked Photoshop, and I used Photoshop, and I was like, what the hell does this guy mean? That the visual image has become unreliable, like you depend on the image. But really we do, and I think we're all living in a time where we're we're okay with it now that we know that the majority of the images that we look at are not real. They've been doctored and they've been given to us. But I was interested in being a part of that, but using it not to sell some sort of deodorant or beer or whatever, but to do it in the way that an artist can do with it and really play with it and play with your mind. So the people that I like to look at, I was surrounded by sculpture majors, by painters, and all this stuff in LA. So I started, really going back to those survey classes that they made me take and looking at, Lichtenstein, Burden, Baldessari. I love Baldessari. I wish there was a Photoshop filter called John Baldessari, and I could just Baldessari my pictures, because that would be amazing. Wim Delvoye, who does these awesome sculptures that are just, he took like a cathedral filter and slapped it onto an excavator. I mean, and this thing it's like half size. It would just fill up this whole space here. And I thought, wow, all these people are just like screwing with the image. They are, they're taking one texture, putting it on another object, or just really removing things and seeing how much can you understand with the little bits that we leave there. I like papersmiths. People are like, what's a papersmith? But there's two that you might have heard of. Yukon Teruya does these really great. This one that's up here, I actually have a cool laser pointer today. This up here, this is a McDonald's bag on end, and in the top, he does this crazy cutting, and then this tree falls down into it. And so a lot of his work, it really has to do with these themes of, ecology, but using the detritus material of, industry. Swoon is a female graffiti artist out of Brooklyn, and she operates very close to like stencil graffiti artists, but she hand cuts everything. And so she is kind of like the Carol Walker type working method artist of the street. And she'll just slap it up on a wall and leave it. And I've seen several of her pieces in person, and I just love to go up and see those corners where the X-Acto knife went over, because it's just like proof that it wasn't a machine that made that thing. I really love WK Interact. He's a street artist that really can accomplish a lot with just a black and white palette. Has this great sense of motion. I'm fascinated by people who can put so much effort into a piece that they just leave out on the street. And then, right during the beginning of my grad school, I got this wonderful experience. My friend Kyle called me up, and Kyle always has just these awesome hookups to get into shows in LA. He's like, hey man, I've got 2 tickets for the opening preview night of Banksy's Barely Legal. And I'm like, you do not. And he did. And we went, and we were there, and there were famous people there, and they were buying these like replica Banksy, he takes his stencils and he puts them on this piece of junk sheet metal that he found in an alley. And he's selling them for like tens of thousands of dollars. Brad and Angelina were there. This is before they were even Brangelina, I think. But they were buying something, and we were there for the night that they actually had the elephant painted before PETA came and threw a fit. And it was cool because there was just an elephant that was painted to match the wallpaper in this room. And it was really cool, but of this whole show, he had sculptures, he had paintings, he had this ice cream truck with stencils all over it. He had these stencils for sale that were like repros. But the thing that drew me the most was over to the side, there were 2 of these. And it's a piece of acrylic drilled with a mount board behind it, and this is poster board, and this is cut out, and this is overspray. This was a tool. This wasn't his piece. This is what, if there is a Banksy, this is what Banksy made, and something really struck a chord because nobody cared about that. If you try and Google that show, look for images for it, you won't find those, because I took that one. And I just didn't understand that. Like, why did nobody care about this thing that was the most evidence of the mark of the artist that was at this show? And everybody wanted to buy, like the stencil on metal, which really, once you make the stencil, any shop assistant monkey can go spray that on a piece of found metal, right? But that was what they were clamoring over. This is what I wanted to steal, but there were lots of armed guards. So I did not. So anyways, this whole idea of the cut and this positive, negative, I started playing around with this. I really liked stencil graffiti, and so I was like, how can I bring this into some sort of sculptural object? So I started this positive, negative series. It was all based on this idea of one cut could produce two objects. I like that. For stencil graffiti, they made a tool and they sprayed through that that created this other object. But there was still that tool that nobody cared about, but I cared about. So I started making these series, and this is a series they're all about the size of a paperback, maybe a little bit larger. I started with this standard shape, rounded the corners, and it's a stack of 3 pieces. And all of these 3 pieces were cut out of these 3 pieces. When you turn it sideways, you can kind of see how it all lines up. This is made out of aluminum, and it's only about 18 gauge, I think, so it's pretty thin. But I was cutting these by hand. And for me, I really found it this element of zen where I would just start this cut, and if you look at it, it's a really freaking detailed cut. It just comes all the way. And I would just zone out on it. It'd be like when you're driving on a long, lonely highway, and you go, man. You just listen to some headphones. And before I knew it, I had this really intricate piece that would fall out. So I stacked them all up, and I was playing with how the image wasn't always clear because I put this space in between them. This piece is called Dynamic. This time was really crappy. We were so embroiled in war, and I was a grad student, and I hated everything about the government. I hated the war, and I thought that's what I was supposed to be making work about. And so it really permeated a lot of my stuff, and I feel that, very early on, while I was trying to develop my own voice, that I was using a very muted palette, and I wasn't exploring things. I wasn't, really digging through and trying to find out what it was that I was trying to express, as opposed to, kind of letting that anger and that hostility that was stewing around me come back out through my work. This piece is called Static. This is a little bit of an insight in how I made these pieces. I start with a photo and I crop it all out. I come in, use a pen tool, select everything, drop out all the background, go through a couple different steps, break it down into a 3-layer. You can see here I create these templates. And I was creating these really ridiculous detailed templates, and then I was turning around and hand cutting them. Everybody was asking me, why don't you laser cut this stuff? Why don't you water jet cut this stuff? And I was, well, I kind of like to hand cut it. I don't know. I'm too lazy to go get it laser cut somewhere. But really, I liked to hand cut it. There was something about that. It was my connection back to that Banksy stencil. There was proof in that. Like, it was my mark of the hand. It was something that legitimized it as actually being a handmade object, and that was really important to me. You can see here I've gone and taken, this is aluminum plate. This is what got cut out of it. So again, one long cut creates one intricate object. And there's really not a lot of room for error, because if you make the wrong cut and you cut part of it off, you got to start over. I'm working with aluminum. You can't really put it back together unless you're really good at TIG welding, and I did not know how to TIG weld at that time. Down here you can see all the painted components, these little rails, all these little rubber washers, and these sliding hitch pins that I used to put it together. I made a lot of models when I was a kid. For some reason, I felt like that I needed to document some of my work this way, kind of laid out, almost with a schematic, so people might understand all of the intricacies that went into it. I had this obsession for quite a while of trying to figure out how I could produce a piece with as many stupid little components in it. I don't know what it was, but I really overcomplicated things. I really enjoyed designing objects, designing the process of how I was going to make that object, and that's what my mind would run in circles about. You can see here the finished piece, again, the positive element that came out of the negative element. I was painting these. I was using flat spray paint because, again, I wanted to relate to that idea of stencil graffiti. I was using those little hitch pins that you could pull out, and they sit right on these rails right here on the ends. So if you pulled these things out, you could separate all the layers. And if you did that to this form here, then really you'd be left with 3 stencils, and you could go and use that as a tool if you wanted. So I was still kind of playing around with the idea of, tool making, positive, negative, cutting out, and I knew I was onto something, but I didn't know what it was. And a teacher had said to me, you know, if you think you know you're onto something and it's making you crazy, then do more of it. Because you really, if something is making you crazy and you're thinking about it all the time, it's probably really important, and there's something about it that you need to figure out, and it's important to your practice. So I listened to those words and I tried to go a little bit further with the whole process. So I was in all these classes with painters and sculptors, and I'm a metalsmith. And they kept asking me, why is it so small? Why are you making all this stuff so small? They didn't understand. And so I was like, okay, so I'm going to dig a little bit deeper, but I also want to go a little bit bigger. So I started doing some of these similar concepts in a larger scale and playing with multiple scales too. This is a piece that I did. I took and combined a tank with a finial scroll. You can see the 3 layers there. And I started playing around with this different presentation. I did 4 pieces like this. So I went ahead and took all those positive elements and I assembled them into a sculptural object. And then those sheets that I could pull apart, instead of making that negative object, I used those as tools, showed them in the aftermath form, and then this is what it produced. So it was kind of 3 different stages, 3 different uses. And so I was expanding on that 1 cut, 2 objects, because now it was 1 cut, an object, 3 tools that produces another object. So I actually, by not assembling these into an object, I created a 3rd object with them. And I created that 3rd object out of the wonderful formula Banksy uses, scrap metal and spray paint. Only his would be like $56,000 right there. So I got one in my bathroom. It's cool. So you can see here, this is the original design. This was the sculpture, and then this was the spray painted stencil. And really, that image is translating the same all the way across, as long as you get that frontal view of it. But I was really, really in love with this that was happening here. You know, being in the gallery, seeing that light and how it would play on the piece. So I felt like I was in a rut and I was doing all this flat work. So I wanted to do something else. And you know, being around all these students of these other professions, they kept throwing this word at me, decorative, decorative. Your work is decorative. Why is it so decorative? What are you making? What is its purpose? Is it decorative? And I was like, what do you mean decorative? And so then I started just thinking about that word, decorative and decoration, and right at that same time, my parents split up, and I was in California, they were in Illinois, and they just started sending me boxes of my stuff, right? And they're just really nothing as heartbreaking as your parents breaking up and then shipping all your belongings to you. But I would just keep opening these boxes, and it was like all this stuff from school, and then they sent me like all these old toys that I had, and so I started trying to take this idea of what I was doing with these flat images, of mashing them together, you know, these photographic elements and these decorative elements, and start doing that with 3D objects and explore the term of decoration. So I did this big series of what I did. I was hacking up these toys and sticking them together with glue and wax or whatever, and I was trying to build on the same like visual organization principles that go into different medals of honor. So there's always like starburst patterns and laurel wreaths and like a severed head, something with wings, maybe a cross, a little bit of decorative crap here and there, you know, just it's the same stuff over and over again. If there's an animal, it's like an animal that would eat you, those types of things, or it would take your eye, you know, it was never like, they never put like a lamb on a medal of honor, you know, there's never like a bunny. So I started doing that, you know, and I got like little pilots' heads and like gorillas and G.I. Joe missiles and all this stuff that kept coming my way, and then I was just collecting all this other plastic junk and just trying to really mimic this organization method using my toys. And then I used a metalsmithing process called electroforming. So from this stage, what would happen is I sprayed them with copper spray paint, and it's actually got little bits of copper in it. So it creates a metallic coating on it. And then you put it in an electrolysis bath system, and it grows a skin of copper on the outside. So through electricity, it forms a layer of copper. It's kind of like if you ever had your baby shoes bronzed, they kind of like encase it in metal. It's a similar idea as that. It's like, mummifying it. And then I burned them all out. So I created this metal skin around it, and then I put them in an oven and just incinerated all these things that had come. And to me, it was kind of therapeutic. I had gone through that period. I was making all of this work. I was thinking way too much about politics. I was watching way too much CNN. Like, I knew all of Anderson Cooper's isms before he even said them. I knew his jokes. I finished his sentences. And this was kind of a way for me to just finish all of that. So this was my last body of work that I ever did that had anything to do with war or aggression, politics, and things like that. And I really felt like it was important for me to explore those. And through this and dealing with some of these childhood things, I also came to realize that those things that I was given as a kid, and a lot of guys in my generation, G.I. Joes and Transformers and everything else, was all representations of the Cold War. It was good versus evil, Star Wars. There were all these night quests. Everything said, hey, you should go out and get a weapon, rescue somebody, kill somebody else, and then you'll be a man. And I didn't really agree with that. And so I dealt with all of these issues, and this was me kind of putting it to rest. So each one of these things, they're about this big. They're pretty big for a Medal of Honor. So they're definitely a caricature of it. This was the first time I used powder coating. And then they're arranged on a grid pattern on the wall. And so there's like a little stand, sets it off the wall, so that it creates all these wonderful shadows. But you can see all these different ones. There's some that are red, chrome-colored, white, and black. And they're all hollow. So all of the original objects that I used to create them were burned away. They were gone. And to me, that really helped just free me of all that junk. From there, I started this new thing. I liked that I was working with images. I didn't want to give that up. I wanted to continue working. And so I was trying to find other images to work with. And I have a real guilty pleasure. I am the guy who steals the safety placard cards from these airplane seat pockets. I steal them. I have an incredible collection of them. I steal them from boats. I take them from trains. I take them from buses. I've taken them from cabs before. Yes, in some countries they have them in cabs. I have picked them off of the walls of subway cars. I have a lot of them. I really like the ones that are in hotels as well, that are under glass. I can get those out. All right. I know how to get out of this building in case of a fire. So if there's a fire, follow me. I know where it is because I already stole that map. Okay? So I was doing this, and I was on my way back from a conference. I was stealing this, and I was looking at it, and I was like, why do I do this? What's up with these informational icons that I like? And I just couldn't figure it out. But again, something was bugging me. I kept doing it, so I figured, let's put it in the art. All right? So I started a new series. I wanted to crossbreed informative with the decorative. So I'm still working with kind of ornate decorative scrolls, but I'm taking that imagery. I'm still doing layering, but I've gotten rid of that negative. All right, I dealt with that. I got my whole making of the tools thing out. And so this was just kind of a new step forward. I'm dragging this net behind me. I'm picking up some new stuff, and some of my things are falling away. So you can see this is an airplane one. It's crossed with a scroll. What's really wonderful about it is it makes it look like it's on fire and it's going down. And if it's on fire and going down, that's really not the time to jump out, but maybe it is. So I really didn't intend for it, but these wonderful things happen when you take a really informative thing and just shove something else in there. It becomes muddied. You don't really think of extra stuff when you read an instruction sheet. It's what you need to know, it's what you need to do, and they don't really try and make it look that pretty. Again, if you see from the side, there's a little bit of gap between the layers, so the information gets further muddied up. Like now the pilots are jumping out. And so I was dealing with not only like ideas of exiting, but moving, transit. I was really I was becoming aware again of all of this industrial thing that was around me. I moved from Newport Beach to Long Beach, California. Newport Beach is pretty ritzy. It was too rich for my blood. I had a really, really tiny apartment that I paid way too much money for. I moved up to Long Beach, and it's this port city. It's the second largest port city on the West Coast. I mean, like the huge cranes, all sorts of stuff, trucks everywhere. You don't want to drive a little car there, all right? But you should probably be wearing those masks because the air is really filthy too. But there's always like helicopters and the beeping of trucks backing up. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. This stuff really started influencing my work. This one's a train car. That's an Amtrak diagram. That's how you get out of an Amtrak car. I'm carrying on. I've let go of the paint. I'm working with powder coat. Powder coat is an electrostatic process, so you spray paint on, but it's in a powder form. It's not liquid. And it sticks to your object through static electricity, kind of like when you rub a balloon on your head and it pulls your hair up, that kind of deal. So it sticks to it, you know, like when you got to have a lint roller. And then you bake it, and it fuses into a nice, smooth surface. It's really durable. They use it for like everything that's metal that you buy from IKEA, lots of car parts. If you have like silver rims, your car rims are powder coated. Very durable. So I was making this you know, colorful, kind of playful jewelry. You know, making the necklace cords out of white vinyl. You know, I'm still using sterling silver in it here and there, but really I'm using a lot of industrial materials and industrial imagery as well. I was asked to be a part of the Tributaries series by the National Ornamental Metals Museum in Memphis, Tennessee. And it's a series for emerging artists, and they have like a kind of like a project room space where they just install one new emerging artist at a time, and they do, I think, like 8 or 9 a year. And it used to be by invitation, and now they do like a tryout thing of some sort. You have to apply for it, whatever. But I was lucky. I got in the last year that they were just asking people. So just out of the blue, they just asked, like, hey, do you want to be a part of this? And I said yes. But every time I say yes to something, I feel like obligated to make this incredible, mind-blowing new body of work, okay? And that's good, I think. You know, saying yes to things and participating in different shows, that's kind of like my version of an assignment, because I don't have anybody telling me what to do anymore, and it's really easy to just be like, yeah, look at all this cool stuff I made. But, so this helps me figure out what I'm gonna do next. And so I don't fight it, even though it does drive me crazy a little bit. So for this show, I wanted to go further than what I had done with the Exit Strategies series, where, you know, I was working with the exit diagrams and these movement diagrams, and I was putting that decorative form behind it, and I was just kind of laying it down as a plane. And for this, I really wanted to start twisting. I really wanted to push like how I was using Photoshop and Illustrator, and you know, maybe use it for more than the 10% that it's capable of. So, you know, I start creating, you know, meshes and curves and things like that. And I really start twisting forms in this series. Again, I'm working with kind of industrial themes, and then I'm placing them into a context of the ornate. So for this one, I started with a kind of a hauling crane, or like a gantry crane from a dock. And I'm working with these really classic damask patterns and stuff. And, you know, I'm doing some mirroring with them at first, and then I'm warping them to kind of create this ground to where it looks like it has now folded over, and this is the edge of a dock or the edge of some sort of, you know, precipice that it's going to lift something up off of. I wanted to go smaller. I've been making a lot of man brooches. I mean, they were big. They were brooches. I mean, they were big. All right. And so, you know, every time somebody asks me a question that, you know, I could potentially get really pissed off about, like, why are you being so decorative? Why are your brooches so big? I can get mad, or I can say, why are my brooches so big? And so I set, you know, I was like, I'm going to make some smaller work, and maybe, you know, I won't just be like a guy artist making wearable work for guys, because that's really not my agenda. You know, you have to think about some of that stuff, like what are people reading into your work that is not what you're trying to do at all. So I set the smaller size. Everything had to be less than 4 inches by 4 inches, you know. And, you know, I really wanted it closer to 3 by 3 for, you know, this kind of dimension here. So obviously, this is larger than life scale, right here. It was a little bit bigger. But anyways, in order to get that done, like some of these details, there's no way I was going to be able to cut that by hand. So I broke down and I started using a laser cutter system. And so I would do a lot of drawing. I start with photos in Photoshop, tweak them how I want, move it into Illustrator, use some auto trace, do some manual adaptation, do some twisting of some forms, and then I export into AutoCAD, tidy everything up, take it to a laser cutter. And so this is actually 3.5 by 3.5 inches. So it's wee for me. And this thing is like, it's stainless steel, the thickness of a hair. It's so lovely. It's so fragile. It looks like it's the stainless cable that should be going up and grabbing that hook that's there. And so I was really pleased with that. You know, I found that it was a willing trade-off that I was happy about making, that sacrifice of not cutting everything by hand. This was a panel truck. I love panel trucks. All my graph buddies love panel trucks because they are just a billboard waiting to be spray painted right there. Okay, so you know, here I'm starting with this Mercedes truck. I'm starting with this Damask scroll over here, and you can see I'm really trying to kind of curve it to where it almost feels like this same structure that's here wrapping around. You know, but it's not a structure. It's just this thing. It's this ground. It's this void. It's this misty type of thing. And then you know, I love the 3D effect that all my graph buddies do, and they put these thick black basic stamps around everything. They just go in and they give it this huge depth and this huge thickness. So this was the other thing that was new to my work, was creating this depth to that scroll work that was going around it. Because before, the scroll work was very flat. And so I really wanted to kind of give that homage to that depth, that pushing, that popping that was going on there. Give it a real thickness, make that scroll an object instead of what it started as, which was just kind of a graphic. And there's the final piece. I started appropriating this little symbol. You'll see it's on a few of my pieces. It's already been up a couple times. And I don't really tell too many people what it is. If you figure it out or you really want to know, come and talk to me later. But I started playing with a signature that wasn't a signature, that nobody understood, but actually, you know, when people got it, they would figure it out. And including it was kind of like my own way of putting my tag on a piece or a signature. Instead of signing it, I wanted to tag it. I wanted to play around with that. This was the old school towers before, you know, you got just inundated with cell phone towers. These are, I think, more radio television towers. There's a lot of these up in these hill areas. We have, in Long Beach, there's a place called Signal Hill. And that's just because that is the poor hill that they decided to put like 5,000 aerial towers on, because it's the highest point in that whole valley area. And so it was once, I mean, if you go up there, it's a beautiful view, but if you look at the hill, it's just ugly. It is just foul looking. So this was up on Signal Hill, and so I broke this all down, and I wanted to create my own hill for it. This is the final piece here. And again, I climbed up this little ladder, and I put my tag right up there. So I was starting to play around and become a little bit more lighthearted with things. I was really glad I let go of all that political tension and stuff that was bugging me, and I wanted to go even further. So this series, I did a short run series of it. It was called the Urban Limited series, and I was trying to take urban furniture and crisscross them with like some natural objects. You know, again, a lighthearted commentary about how, you know, our urban experience is becoming far less natural and more man-made and uber-designed. So these were various ones. I got like a stoplight with some sprouts growing out of it as if it was like a planter tray. I like this one. It's called Media Trappings. A mailbox popsicle, a cell phone tower cactus, a CCTV Buckeye horn. So, you know, I was really just trying to again, mash up some different things. These were really small. They were laser cut. They were real quickies for me. They were by the suggestion of my gallerist, who's like, hey, can you make something that's a little bit more affordable, kind of, you know, like an afterthought add-on type sale for me, you know, to push with some other work and things like that. And so I was doing these. I have a little bit more of sterling silver details into them with a nice little brush cross-hatched finish on them, just to kind of make them a little bit more of a jewelry object. On the back, though, I really started continuing the those hints of like the homage to, you know, my love and ties to people who go out and spray paint. And so, you know, I really tried to incorporate these little icons of their language, the drips, the bubbles, the arrows, things like that. Plus I was, you know, really trying to give a little something extra, a little reward on the back, make that back interesting on the piece. This is media trappings. Again, you can see little arrows and stuff up here. I love the back of this piece. I really like that bold design of it. And it's a newspaper box propped up like, you know, the trap that Wile E. Coyote set with a carrot for Bugs Bunny or whatever. And this was kind of a comment on my own problem that, you know, for a long time I let news ruin my day. I let the news channel just put me in a bad mood for the whole day. So one step leads to 2 steps, leads to 3, leads to 4. I start making these. They're called fresh chains. I got one on today. It is almost all recycled material. I'm taking like discarded tubing, discarded, all this is all steel from electric motors that I pull out of appliances that people throw away, vacuum cleaners, blenders, man. In a city like Long Beach, everybody throws everything away. It's amazing. But we have this awesome recycling program, and you can throw plastic, metal, paper, all into one bin, glass. And so I was really enjoying this idea of, okay, I can take that vacuum cleaner, I can kind of beat it apart a little bit, you know, pull out the stuff that I need, break it down, throw the chunks of plastic in, throw the chunks of metal in. And it's actually going to be recycled more that way than when it was in the dumpster where I found it. So I was really like salvaging some materials, giving a new life, and then also extending them beyond. So I was really starting to think about ideas of recycling, upcycling, which is not just reusing, but kind of repurposing and placing a material or an object into a higher status category, taking junk, making jewelry, but not, you know, not junk jewelry, something different. That was important to me. You can see these are called stator plates. They go on the outside of an electric motor. I'm powder coating them. And I was like, all right, these are kind of cool. They're somewhere in between like a Hawaiian lei and some rapper bling, you know, like this is cool. And I have a lot of friends who are also DJs and stuff too, and they, you know, they come over to my studio and they're like, they always want to borrow work and wear it out to the clubs. I'm like, I don't know, man, it's gonna come back, it's gonna have like, I don't know, Bartles and James spilled on it, and you know, it's gonna stink, there's gonna be glitter all over it, because that's what you do, you like put glitter all over yourself. But I started letting them go out, and they were taking some pictures, and so I was like, okay, I should take some pictures. And so this idea of play really started coming into my work, and I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. Like, it allowed me to kind of be a different person. People started asking me to speak at the same time, and so I don't really like to talk to a bunch of people. I like to talk to people one-on-one, but really this is kind of not, you know, it's not natural for a lot of people to stand up in front of all these people and just talk about yourself for an extended period of time. So the idea of, you know, putting on a like costume and having a bit of a character and playing with it made that much easier for me. And it allowed me to just be all snarky and smirky. So the piece that I have on is recycled steel, recycled vinyl tubing, ABS plastic, and this is recycled rabbit fur. I don't believe in killing animals for fur and things like that, but I know a lot of people who like to work with it for its material qualities, and if you can find something at a resale shop, okay. You know, I'm giving it its second life. At least it didn't go in the trash by somebody. And so, you know, I've only used for a couple times. And you know, there's a lot of bunnies too, so they're good. And I did some black ones, I did some colorful ones, but they're really kind of big and funky. And for me, I really like that, being able to act out with it. I was asked to be a part of a show called Neo Rococo at University of Indianapolis by Carolyn Springer. And the title of the show was Rocks and Shells Interpreted in Contemporary Jewelry Design. I don't use rocks or shells, so what do you want me to do? And she's like, well, you know, I really like all the scroll work and the decorative stuff. I was like, oh, not the decorative thing again. And she's like, could you maybe try to put some sort of stones, or can you work with this? I like your work. I want to put you in this show. It's like, okay, I don't really want to do, I'll do this. And so, as people were starting to ask me about things, I had to learn to say yes and be open-minded to that. There's a certain element of uncertainty, like, I don't know how I'm going to do that. I don't know, how's my work going to fit in? Is this just going to be a big headache for me? Am I going to make something special just for the show and it's going to suck and nobody's going to like it and then I wasted my time on it? There's all these things you can always say, like, I don't know if I should do this. But sometimes just saying yes to those opportunities and risking that uncertainty, being okay with it and just letting it go and trying will lead to some really good things. And I've had a few times where that's happened to me, and this was one of them. So I made these pieces. I wanted to work with some nostalgic stuff. Is this neo-rococo, is kind of this, this classicism type thing, and I don't know. To me, I wanted to have this touch of nostalgia into it. And I used to have this Tonka truck, and it was yellow, and I would ride that sucker. I would just ride it in the dirt and ride it all over the place, and there was mud up in the wheels, and I rode it until the axles were all bent and everything. It wasn't a truck. I didn't drive it. I rode that thing. And it was like the old one where it was sheet metal that you could hit another kid with it and hurt them really bad. So, this was the only kind of black and white sketch that I could find, a little diagram. So I kind of redid that and I made my own over here based on that Tonka truck. And then I also had this experience. My father's friend worked for Caterpillar, and we used to go to this thing called the Cat Power Parade in Springfield, Illinois. And they had this cool hill that came up, and we were all sitting on the one side of the hill, and down on the other side there was this crazy staging area where they had all these Caterpillar products, these big earth mover tractors. And they would come up, and it'd be all the front loaders, and they'd come up, and then they would just do these choreographed spins all together. It'd be all 5 of them, the big one and all the way down to the baby one, and they were all doing the same spin, and then they would shovel some stuff, and then they'd go back down the hill, and all the dump trucks would come up too. And so I really wanted to try and tie that in, so I also picked a Caterpillar bulldozer to be the other piece, kind of like a pusher and a hauler, and working from that. So I went ahead and did my thing to it. I kind of stylized everything, threw some scrolls in there, even tweaked a little bit of the grills, add a little extra detail to it just to make it look overly fancy. And then I put fool's gold on it because I was like, yeah, that kind of looks like a big boulder, and it's fool's gold. It's pretty funny. So technically it's iron pyrite, but this is kind of my cop-out. I don't really like working with gold or diamonds or gems because there's so many bad issues associated with them, and there's a lot of legwork to make sure that those materials aren't coming from a conflict area. But this stuff comes from Colorado, so and they got a stink load of it, and you can buy it at every truck stop from here to California, every one of them, right by the cash register. So I was using these chunks of pyrite, and I really liked that facet to it, and that really stuck with me. And so if I hadn't taken this risk, it wouldn't lead to the next body of work that I did. So, and the other part, I got to name a piece Dumper. I really like that. You got dozer and dumper. So what I'm working on now is called the Would Be Diamond series. And it's a play on words because if I was comfortable with it, they would be diamonds, but I'm not. And I wanted to start playing with gender, with nostalgia, with paint again, and with form, that facet form. I've been staring at these things in LA, these bare billboards, these trestles. This is the entrance to Chinatown. I was like, whoa, they got this dragon on top of this trestle. That is kind of a little old and new mixed together right there. So I found this thing, this grid printout. I think it was actually part of an IBM ad. And I remembered this video that I was made to watch in grad school, because we're made to watch everything. We don't really enjoy it, but we'll go back and we'll enjoy it later. And it's called The 5 Obstructions. And it's this guy, Lars von Trier, remaking Jorgen Leith's The Perfect Human movie. And so it's a new director giving this guy limitations, telling him, remake this film that you made in the 60s or 70s, but you've got to do it this way. And one of them was, well, you've got to do it in a hostile location. So they did it in the barrios of Cuba or something like that. And then one of them was, you can't have any video takes longer than 10 seconds. One of them was, it's got to be a cartoon. And it's like, what? I got to remake my movie as a cartoon? But it was cool because he said yes, And then he invested in rotoscoping, and now he has a lot of money. So, because they make all the Chase Bank commercials that way, I think. So I went back to this and I was like, all right, I've got all these things that I've been working on. Maybe I need to set some rules. I need to narrow my focus just a little bit. So I gave myself some obstructions. And mine were, I'm not going to use the computer. I'm going to go back to paint, and I want to address gender. Because my gallerist said, who are you making these things for? Are these for guys? Are these for girls? I was like, I don't know. Maybe I should make something that girls would like. So I started out with this piece of paper, and I just started drawing some stuff. And then I started cutting some metal and just laying them out. I didn't use a computer. I just traced. I just drew. I did that old stuff. I did the stuff that you guys have to do every day, right? So I came up with these forms, these trellis forms that were kind of like those billboard structures. And then I made all these little wooden diamonds. So I cut down all this recycled wood that I had found because people were throwing away like solid wood furniture, hacked it into these little bits and just start sanding. I would sit with my belt sander for hours and hours and hours. And then I painted them with nail polish. And for me, that was a little bit of an investigation into gender, because they say that your sense of smell is one of the most powerful senses that you have, and it triggers memories. And whenever I smell nail polish, all I can think of is my first true love who ripped my heart out and stomped it on the ground and went and lived in another country. Because she painted her nails like every day, twice a day. It was like her addiction. All right. So I'm sitting and I'm painting like hundreds of these little diamonds with nail polish, and it's just like, I hate you. God, I hate you. Oh. And so I was making myself go through this. Again, developing all of these components, and then I start putting them into these structures. Just like that dragon on top of the billboard structure, that trellis, I got this organic, this kind of feminine structure, the gem structure. It grows with this kind of man-made, really like industrial structure. And I got all this new color. You see the backs, different, but just as enjoyable as the front. I'm taking a lot of the lessons that I learned through my previous series, and I'm shoving them into this, the parts that I thought really worked for me. I have a newfound love for pink. As you can see, I put it in all my fonts. I left a few that had like some natural wood because the hippies like it. I got invited to do this project called Costume. Okay. And I made some more. And they got in a photo booth. And I made a ring, and I got into a book. And all of this stuff happened just because I took that risk and did that, the Neo-Rococo show. I started all this new stuff, and a lot of cool things have been happening to me. Thank you so very much. If you have some questions, I'll be out in the hall.